Hey guys, welcome to David Audio Production. Thank you for taking the time to check out my video. The Pultec EQ has, over time, become one of the industry standard EQs, both for recording, mixing, mastering, pretty much any application to do with audio. And the original hardware, while being very hard to come by these days and being very expensive, has been recreated now by plug-in manufacturers many times, some more successful than others. But most of your plug-in manufacturers now have come up with some kind of a Pultec emulation. The Pultec is a very musical EQ. It's very hard to make sound bad. You can push these things very hard and they will still sound good. But they're a little bit esoteric to use. Their design's a little strange, and a lot of people don't really understand what's actually happening under the hood of a Pultec EQ while you're using it. So in this video, I'm going to try to show everybody just exactly what a Pultec does. In order to show you guys in a visual manner what happens when you use a Pultec EQ to your audio, I'm going to use this. This is the Pultec EQ curve analyzer. This is a free plugin, and this one works by putting two instances on a track. The first instance acts as a signal generator, and the second one acts as a signal receiver and display. So if you put an EQ plugin in between, this is just the stock re-EQ that comes with Reaper. If you were to put this in between the two instances and manipulate it, it will show you exactly what you're doing on the display. So like if you were to just do a boost around 1K, here's a 12K boost around 1K. You see on the analyzer that it's showing you that boost taking place. If you manipulate the Q factor, it shows basically exactly what the EQ curve is doing across the audio spectrum. So if you were to stick a Pultec emulation in between them, this is the Universal Audio Pultec EQ, which has basically been recognized as probably one of the most accurate recreations of a Pultec EQ out there. This will show you exactly what's happening as you manipulate the button, as you manipulate the EQ. So your basic Pultec EQ exists of a low frequency and a high frequency section, okay? The low frequency section has a boost and an attenuator and is selectable for 20, 30, 60, and 100 hertz frequency centers. The high frequency boost is selectable from 3K through 16K and is also affected by this bandwidth knob. And then there's a separate attenuator up here that you can set at either 5, 10, or 20K. Okay, this switch over here turns the actual EQ on and off. A lot of people will use a Pultec's circuitry without using the EQ to just have an effect on the audio. And then the plugin itself is turned on and off here by this knob here. And then this is an output knob from off to 12 dB boost so that you can gain match the plugin. Now, when I activate the plugin, couple things happen right away. The plugin is working on audio whenever it's activated. So as I activate the plugin, as you can see, there is a almost a 2 dB boost across the frequency spectrum. So you're going to get a 2 dB jump when you turn a plugin on, when you turn this plugin on, which basically, as soon as you turn it on, it's going to sound better to your ears because our ears always interpret louder as better. So that is one thing to recognize when you're putting a plugin like this on your mix, is that it's going to jump a couple dB. It's going to sound better to your ears. Always keep that in mind. You will also see that as the circuitry is engaged, there is a very slight little roll off up here at above 10K. Very slight roll off. Okay, were I to disengage the EQ, you'll see that that actually boosts. So the actual circuitry of the EQ, when you're not of the actual processing unit, does have a high frequency boost, which is what a lot of people will use a Pultec for on the mixes. They'll just have it without the EQ on, just to get that nice high frequency boost going on up there. However, that's not what this video is about. Okay. So as you can see, right now I have it set to a 30 hertz, okay, on the low frequency. And so if I was to boost at 30 hertz, what you notice right away is that taking it up to 5 does not equate to your dB boost. 5 puts me up around 9.5 down here at 30 hertz, okay? What you will also notice is that this is a very gentle boost, okay? It's a very gentle shelf boost sloping all the way down to 1K. As you can see, boosting at 30 hertz basically has an effect on the entire audio spectrum from 20 hertz through 20K. You see that it's pulling it up all the way up to like 5. It's being boosted all the way up above 500K. Okay, at 30 hertz. So if you put that up to 60 hertz and do that, again, you'll see again that we're almost at 9 dB, but now your center at 60 hertz, which is right here before the roll-off starts, now you're actually boosting all the way up above 1K before it slopes down. It's actually closer to 2K. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is that even though you're centering your boost at 60 hertz, you are boosting frequencies all the way up the spectrum, okay? The same thing with the attenuator side of that. If it's at 60 hertz right now and I attenuate up to 5, you can see here that it's attenuating down to 8 dB all the way up to almost 2K before you get back above the 0 line on the graph. So these boosts and cuts are wide and gentle, which is one of the reasons that you can push a Pultec as hard as you can and it won't sound harsh, because it's not spiking any frequencies, okay? Now, if you look at the high frequency boost, I have it set on, let's put it on 5K, okay? Now, if I boost the high frequency, you will see that this is a bell curve now, not a shelf. Okay, and you will see again that it is boosting at 5K, but I have it boosted up to 5 and it's boosting almost 7 dB. So again, the numbers on the knobs are not equating to the actual dB of boost and cut, okay? The bandwidth knob affects only this bell curve. It does not affect anything else on the EQ. And what you will notice on the bandwidth knob is a lot of people think that this is a Q, that is going to widen the bell or narrow the bell, and it is not. As you turn the bandwidth up, what you see is it's actually decreasing the boost, but it's making the actual bell curve itself more gentle. So in other words, a broad bandwidth is a gentle bell curve, and the sharp is a pointier bell curve with a higher boost, but it's not affecting the Q factor. So if I was to disable this and put the re-EQ back on and re-enable the re-EQ, as you can see, if you adjust the Q on the re-EQ, the boost itself is not changing, just the width of the curve itself is changing. That is not how the bandwidth works on a Pultec EQ. So don't keep that in mind as well while you're using it. The attenuator on the high frequency, I have set at 10K at this point, is a shelf. Okay, oops, I forgot to re-enable it, sorry. So if I take this one back down to 0, the attenuator is a shelf, okay? And again, it's set at 10K, which is here, but it's attenuating all the way down to 500 hertz and somewhat below. So as with the low frequency section, the high frequency attenuator is a very wide, gentle curve. Even the high frequency boost itself is not a tight curve. It's a very wide curve. So as I'm boosting at 5K, I'm pulling frequencies up all the way down to 500 hertz. The frequencies are actually being affected all the way down there and then up. Okay? That's the basics of a Pultec EQ. It's a very wide, gentle EQ that you can push very hard and won't sound harsh because it's not making any spiky changes to your audio spectrum. Now, the big thing for a Pultec EQ and what makes it as popular as it is for a lot of people is what is known as the low-end trick. Okay? When the Pultecs were initially developed, I don't think that they were intending you to boost and attenuate at the same time. I think they were just intending it to be a booster or an attenuator. But engineers discovered very quickly that if you were to, let's just say, do a boost at 30 hertz, and then you attenuate at 30 hertz, a very interesting thing happens. You would have expected, because these are both shelves, you would have expected when you attenuate that it would just pull that back down as you boosted it up there, but they interact in it in a very unique way. And what happens is you get a dip in the frequency below zero. Around at 30 hertz, it's around 350 hertz, okay? And what that does is it pulls your curve down, gives you a little bit of a hole here in your audio spectrum before it goes back up and restores it to where it was before. That is very useful for adding definition to low-end audio sources. Like if you were to put this on a kick, you would be getting a lot of boost in your kick and below 100 hertz, but then it would pull down up around 300, which leaves room for things like your bass, your snare, the lower end of your guitars, and so on and so on, thus giving your kick a little bit, a nice low-end boost, but also adding a separation from it for other things to occupy, giving it more definition. And that boost and dip moves along with your frequency. So if you were to do that at 60 hertz, your dip bottoms out at 745 on this particular model. And at 100 hertz, it bottoms out at 1300 hertz. So that is something that is very popular for Pultecs to be used for, is to add definition to low-end sources and separate them from the rest of the audio spectrum. Other interesting things happen too. If I was to zero this back out, if you were to, let's say, put a bell boost at 10K, okay, and we were going to make it, we'll leave it sharp for this, and then attenuate at 10K, it leaves the shape of the bell alone, but it pulls it down, and it adds that same dip here on the upper end. Not as, maybe not quite as radical as with the low end trick, but again, it's the same thing. I have a 10K boost and attenuation, and it's giving me a dip that is centered right around 2500 hertz. So if you were needed to add some air or some high end definition to something like an acoustic guitar or cymbals or anything that you want to have a lot of air on, this is a good way to do it, but also then not have it interfere with your upper mids. So that makes the Pultec EQ, again, a very musical EQ, a very flexible EQ for doing a lot of interesting things in your mix, and not being harsh or overbearing on the sound as you use it. What I'd like to do now is run through a few different Pultec emulations that are available out there and show some of the differences between them. For the overall demonstration, I used the Universal Audio standard Pultec EQ, and I understand that a lot of people don't have Universal Audio hardware, so they have no access to the Universal plugins, and they are very expensive. So I'm going to pull a few more reasonable ones and more popular ones out just to let you see how they compare to each other and if there's ways that you can apply them differently. The first one I want to use is probably the most popular Pultec EQ emulation out there, and that is the Waves Pultec EQ. So as you can see, once I enable this one, This one, again, it has pretty much a 1 to 2 dB boost across the board, which, much like the Universal Audio one, the little bit of boost is going to sound better to your ears, but it's also that there is some processing going on in the audio. Unlike the Universal Audio one, enabling or disabling the EQ does not affect the curve on this one. Whereas on the Universal Audio, the upper end changed when you enabled or disabled the EQ. On this one, it stays the same. On this one, I have it at 30 hertz right now. A 5 dB boost in the low end. It's not as aggressive as it was in the Universal Audio. It does not go up as high. And the same thing with the attenuation side, going up to a 5 on this one. It's only affecting down here to negative 2 dB. It's not nearly as aggressive as the Universal Audio one. And thus, doing the low end boost and attenuation trick at 30 hertz, the dip in the curve isn't even going below 0 on the Pultec. It's staying just slightly above 0. And again, the same thing is going to apply if you do the high-end boost trick. As you can see, like boosting at 10K is only getting me up to 5.5 dBs of boost. And then putting the attenuation on it is giving you the little bit of a dip, but again, it's not falling below 0. So this one is definitely not as aggressive or as sharp sounding as like the Universal Audio one will be, and the bandwidth is also much less aggressive on changing the shape of the curve. The one thing that the Pultec does have that the Universal Audio doesn't is that they did emulate 60 hertz or 50 hertz power signal going through. It's 60 hertz for the United States, 50 hertz for Great Britain, which if you activate it, adds a pulse in the low end at 60 hertz or at 50 hertz to emulate the actual sound of a Pultec's hum while it's idling. If that's something that you're into, great. I don't personally see any real application for that in audio, but if that's something that would interest you, then by all means, feel free to go for that. The next one I have here is the IK Multimedia T-Rax. This is the EQP1A. This is their Pultec emulation. And again, I'm going to leave this at 0 and I'm going to activate it now. And what you can see when you activate this one is it actually is pulling down a little bit in the low end. It's below 0. It's slightly above the line. And then there is this interesting squiggle. I don't know what's going on up there in the high end, as opposed to the other two that we've demonstrated already, where they don't have, it's a much smoother curve up high. On this one, again, the boost actually has a slight bell to it. Not very aggressive, not making it to 6 dB. The attenuation does not have that bell to it, but again, that curve is a little bit hinky shaped, moving up. And then doing the low end trick on this one, the dip is actually slightly deeper than on some of them. You do have a slight down curve on the low end. The dip is at 30 hertz is at 500 hertz, so the dip is actually a little bit higher than on some of the other ones. And then on the high end, the boost at 10K, again, this line is not very smooth or squiggly. That is a very wide bandwidth. The sharp bandwidth is a little bit sharper than some of the other ones that you'll see. And then the high-end boost and attenuation trick, again, not exactly the smoothest curve in the world. It does pull below 0, and then there is still that roll-off on the low end. So this is a decent emulation. It's a little problematic in that it's a little bit rough in a couple of places. I don't think that that's going to have a major negative effect on the sound, but it is something to keep in mind if you're using the T-Racks, that it's emulating a different unit probably, and the unit that they were emulating may have had some capacitor issues or resistor issues in it while they were emulating it. The next one I want to show you is a freebie. This is from Kiev Audio. This is a relatively new one. This is the Warmy EQ, and this one they've added frequencies and other features to it that you don't get in a standard Pultec EQ. But in this case, we'll set it to 30, as we've been doing. We'll have everything at 30 and 10, as I've been demoing up to this point. The boost, got to enable it. As you can see, when this one is enabled, there's a lot going on here. There's a low end roll off below 50. If you turn the EQ off, it doesn't go away. There's a low end roll off below 50. There's a high end roll off at below 20 hertz. Again, keep in mind that this is a freebie. I do not have oversampling or anything else engaged on this, because I don't want to I don't want to skew the output. So in this one, if you do the high frequency boost up to around 5, as you can see, this is very much a bell shaped curve. Only gets up to 5 on this one. If you do the attenuation on the low end, it pulls down flat up to 1K as opposed to being a curve. And then the low end trick at 30 hertz is going to look something along the lines of that. Again, you have a much more pronounced bell shape here. The cut is, again, right up around 550 hertz. So definitely going to give you a different audio shape than you do on some of the premium ones. If we boost at 10K, you see that this is actually a very sharp bell at 10K. This one, unlike the other ones, does affect the Q value as opposed to the height and the shape of the curve. And the high-end trick at 10K actually pulls your boost down to almost back to 0 and gives you a much more pronounced dip underneath. And again, there's a very serious roll off above 10K. This one, it doesn't sound terrible. Again, as with the other ones, it does a thing that is slightly different than some of the other ones you see, and being a freebie, this is something you can get to have a completely different Pultec style sound if you were looking to do something like that. The last one I want to look at is the Analog Obsession Rare. Analog Obsession has a lot of fans out there. I don't necessarily count myself among them. I do have a lot of their stuff, and I've used it and looked at it, but I have some problems with them. But again, it's something that I figured I would at least demonstrate and show, because they are very popular, and again, it is free, so you really can't complain if it's a little odd. Engaging the Rare. Again, as you can see on this one, there's a very pronounced roll off in the high end above 1K when it's just idling. Okay, a 5 boost on this one at 30 hertz is extremely high. It goes all the way almost up to 10, and thus the attenuation at 30 hertz. Again, is very aggressive, getting down almost to 8, as opposed to the boost, which is more aggressive. So then the low end trick of going 5 and 5. This one, again, is a very high boost up to 8 dB, a very pronounced dip well below 2 dB at 328 hertz. And again, it's pulling down below 0 all the way up, and it has had no effect on that high end roll off that they have there. So this is, as compared to some of the other ones, a much more aggressive curve for the low end trick. And it's also centered slightly lower than on some of them. Okay. The 10K boost. Again, not very aggressive, just barely to 5, not even up to 5 dB. The broad bandwidth control on this one does affect it as it should, as opposed to the Kiev audio. But again, it's just not very aggressive up there at all. And then the high-end trick with the attenuation, that's just a complete roll-off. There's no boost or anything else. It completely negates your boost at 10K and just gives you a complete roll-off. So if I was to pull that boost out at 10K, you can see that the attenuation at 10K is brutal. It's absolutely brutal, just knocking everything out. So again, I'm not saying that this is good or bad. I'm saying that this is not what I would be looking for in a Pultec EQ emulation myself. Now, in my free EQ video, I touted the Sun EQ as one of my favorite Pultec style emulations. It's basically takes a Pultec and adds a lot of features to it. But I figured we would just take a look at it real quick. Their boost attenuation at 30. Their boost average up to 8 dB, pretty gentle all the way down to 1K. Their attenuation is very aggressive, well below 10 dB. Again, but the curve itself bottom, narrows out very nicely around 1K. The low end trick with this one is going to give you a nice pronounced dip below 2 dB, but still pretty gentle curves, nothing too sharp. The curves are staying very, very smooth. This does have a mid control we're not going to demonstrate right now. They do not have a 10 dB high frequency. They have a 6, 8, or 12. I'll put it at 8 for this one. And this one has a boost and a cut. So we will put the boost up to about there. As you can see, this is a shelving EQ as opposed to a bell curve. But they do have a low pass that you can then use to curve it out. It's not going to give you the high-end trick that you can on a standard Pultec emulation, but it's a very, very usable EQ, especially for the low end of a Pultec. It's a very good emulation, and it is overall a very good sounding EQ and one that I always highly recommend to people to use. So I hope that this was helpful for you guys to understand a little bit better what a Pultec EQ is doing and how it's affecting the audio in your mixes and other projects. I also hope that you guys can use this to choose the right Pultec EQ for you, as well as giving you some ideas of new ways to use them and apply them. I'd like to say thanks again to you guys for taking the time to check out this video. I hope that you guys would consider subscribing to my channel and keep coming back for more videos down the road. Thank you. Bye.